All right, good day class. Welcome to our panibagong video lecture about audit documentation. But before that, we'd like to acknowledge our references, the book of Elenita and Gilbert Cabrera and Gerardo Rocky and the PSA book. All right. So in here, our right, PSA 230 audit documentation. In the context of audit of financial statement, this PSA 230 provides or establish the standards and provides guidance regarding audit documentation. And, and the standard on documentation requires that the auditor should prepare on a timely basis. So audit documentation provides what? A sufficient and appropriate record of the basis of the auditor's report. So the record will support our report or the auditor's report, our conclusion, right? And also evidence that the audit was performed in accordance with PSA applicable legal and regulatory requirements. And so definition of terms, audit documentation means the record of audit procedures performed. Tatlo yan. First, audit of procedures performed. The second is relevant audit evidence obtained. The third one is conclusion the auditor reached. So, see, audit documentation is also known as the working paper or work papers. This also sometimes used. So, what is audit file? Means one or more folders, or other storage media, whether it's physical or electronic form, containing records that comprises audit documentation for specific engagement. So, each specific engagement, meron tayong tinatawag na audit file. Pwedeng marami or isa. Yeah. An appropriate time limit within which to complete the assembly of the final audit is ordinarily not more than 60 days after the date of the auditor's report. And so 60 days. By the way, class, yung sa working papers natin, yung retention natin, mostly sa mga public companies, not more than 7 years yung retention ng working papers. While sa private companies, minimum of 5 years yung retention ng yung working papers. I'll take that in class. So another terms here is experienced auditor, means an individual, whether internal or external, of the firm who has audit or practical audit experience and a reasonable understanding of what? Audit processes, PSA guidelines, the business environment in which the entity operates, yung part yun dun, di ba, sa audit planning natin, ng the audit program. So, yung understanding of the environment of the entity operation, and audit financial reporting issues relevant to the entity industry. So, yan siya, si experienced auditor yan. So, meron siya dapat yan. All right. So, in documenting the nature, timing, and extent the NTE of audit procedures performed, the auditor shall record first, identifying the characteristics of the specific items or matter tested, which is the nature, and who performed the audit work and the date such work was completed, which is the timing, and who is reviewed the audit work performed and the date of extent of such review that is pertain to the extent of the audit procedure performed. All right. So PSA 230 state that in determining the extent of working paper, it's a matter of professional judgment of the auditor. Bakit? because it is neither necessary nor practicable to document every matter or all matter the auditor considers during the audit. So, hindi lahat. Lahat. So, it's more on the professional judgment kung ano yung dapat na isasama natin, ilalagay natin sa working paper. So, magmamatter yung extent of working paper based on the professional judgment. So, in terms of modification or addition of the existing audit documentation, regardless, the auditor shall document the specific reason of making the modification or addition of the audit documentation, and also when and whom they were made and reviewed. All right. So according to PSA 230, working papers may be in the form of data stored and paper and electronic or other media is the definition of audit file. But also working papers assist in planning and performance of the audit. And the second one is the supervision and review of the audit work. So, di ba sa audit planning natin sa first stage natin sa risk assessment, so nandun yung audit program natin, audit planning. So nakalagay yung sa working papers. Later, di-discuss natin yung mga types of working papers. Mapapaloob yung sa planning and performance yung si audit administrative working papers ang tawag nito. And the supervision and review of audit work and the audit evidence resulting from the audit work performed to support the auditor's opinion. So necessary yung working papers natin kasi diyan nalagay sa working papers yung mga audit evidence natin which will support our opinion or the auditor's opinion. All right. So according to PSA 230, requires the auditors to record in the working papers information. First, on the planning of work. Then again, the nature and timing of extent of the audit procedures. Of course, the results of such procedures. I-evaluate natin yung results. And the conclusion drawn from the audit evidence. So once na-evaluate natin yung evidence, i-conclude natin ano yung na-obtain natin na evidence. So part yan doon sa working paper natin. Primarily, the purpose of working paper is to provide the evidence and planning and execution. Diba? Sinabi naman dito, planning of nature, timings, and the result, and the evidence of audit procedures performed. All right. So another PSA, according to PSA 230, working paper should be designed to meet the circumstances and the auditor's needs for each individual audit. Mean to say, these working papers that record the procedure used by the auditor to gather evidence should design talaga, to meet the circumstances of the particular engagement audit or being audited. Right. So proper parts of working paper documentation includes but not limited to what? One is, this is the tick mark, explained in the working papers. The flow chart are included in the working papers. Findings are cross-referenced to support the documentation. Papasok yung indexing natin, index. Accordingly, forms, take note class, forms and derivatives used by the client should be included only to the extent that support the conclusion drawn by the auditor. If the auditor thinks that the forms and directives used by the client is necessary to support our conclusion, then we should include that in our working paper. But not all. Nakalagay dito class. Take note only. Not all forms and directives are included in the working papers. Right? So PSA 230 again stated the form, content, and extent of working papers and the nature, time, and extent are affected by matters such as the following. So the matters that affect the content of on the extent of the working papers that we're going to prepare. First, the nature of the audit procedures to be performed. Of course, the nature, yung characteristic environment ng audit. Yan, maapektuhan yung working papers natin dyan. Then, the risk assessment identified by the auditor. Yung sa risk assessment natin, the phase 1 stage. Then, the extent of judgment. Last take note. Extent of judgment required in performing audit work, evaluating the results. So it also affects our extent, the content of the working paper. The significance of the audit evidence obtained. So if that really significance, then we will include that in our working papers, the auditor's working papers. The nature, again, the nature and extent of exceptions, mga exceptions identified, mga exceptions, kailangan natin yan ipapaloob dun sa working paper natin. And then, the need to document a conclusion or the basis of conclusion, excuse me, not really determinable from the documentation of the work performed or audit evidence obtained. So, yung wala doon na identify na determine natin sa documentation but we have the conclusion, we also included that in our working paper. So it affects our content and extent of working papers. Right. The last one is the methods, methodology, and the tools used, of course. Nalagay natin doon sa working paper natin. Phase A again, 230 states that the working papers ordinarily include conclusions reached by the auditor concerning significant aspects of the audit, including how exception, sinabi natin yan, and the unusual matters. So if any, it should be disclosed by the auditor. Procedures, what have been resolved or treated. So yung mga exception doon, mga unusual matters, the resolution or the treatment of that exemption and the unusual matters should be disclosed, right? So phase 230 working papers are not substitute for the accounting records. So working papers is the owner of the auditor, and this is the accounting records is the owner of the client. So hindi siya pwedeng substitute ng accounting records natin, right? So why audit working papers are indexed? Indexing creates an audit trail and related items to the working papers. So indexing and cross-referencing notation that provides a trail from financial statement to audit documents. Ito yung diagram dyan. So does indexing permit cross-referencing? Simplifies supervisory review. So maganda pag mayroong indexing kasi mapapadali, masisimplify yung supervisory review natin doon sa working paper. So doon sa mga evidence na we gathered to support our opinion. Right. So these are the types of working papers. So we have 5. Audit administrative working papers, working trial balance and a lead schedule, supporting schedules and analysis, adjusting and reclassifying entries, audit memoranda, and documentation of corroborating information. So we will discuss it one by one. So first is the administrative working papers or the audit administrative working papers. From the word administrative, so these are the working papers designed to aid the auditors in the planning, the administration, engagement. So this includes what? The audit plans and programs. So mapapaloob yan sa administrative working papers natin. The internal control questionnaires and flow charts. So napapaloob din yan sa administrative working papers natin. As well as the engagement letters and the time budget. So yan yung administrative natin working papers. Yan natin ilalagay. So what about the working trial balance and the lead schedules are also known as the top schedules. So itong working trial balance, ito yung list of accounts in the client general ledger. So imagine nyo yun, so makikita natin later in diagram or figures from the book of Cabrera. from the client financial statement or the general ledger, si auditor magpi-prepare ng working trial balance with columns that as a minimum include adjusted amount, of course yung amount from the general ledger. So unadjusted yung tawag natin doon. Directly from the client's accounting records, di ba? Sabi ko kanina sa ledger. Then we have their debit or credit proposed adjustment interest with their debit or credit addition or deduction. And the last, audited amount. So makikita natin yan sa table, I mean sa figures later in the slide kung ano yung itsura ng working trial balance. So ito yun siya, minimum inclusion. We have the unadjusted, we have the proposed adjustment, debit or credit, and adjusted audit amount. So it also often called as the backbone of the working papers. The working trial balance, yan yung backbone of the working papers. Sa yung mag-identify ng list from the general ledger of the financial statement prepared by the client. How about si lead schedule naman, also known as the top schedule? Siya yung nag-group ng related accounts balance to support the individual list of working trial balance. So, like for cash and cash equivalents, so siya yung may details noon kung ano yung mga inclusion ng cash and cash equivalents na yun. Kasi group siya na as a cash and cash equivalents. So, mayroon siyang mga details. Yan. Mga details din total, yun yung total ng cash and cash equivalent is assuming X number. So dyan makikita sa lead schedule. Siya yung magsusupport ng details sa working trial balance natin. While si supporting schedules and analysis naman, these are the details schedules. So, medyo malawak-lawak to si detailed supporting schedule kasi siya yung magsusupport doon kay lead schedule. Prepared by auditor supporting specific amounts on the financial statement. Right, makikita natin mamaya sa diagram mamaya, sa figure mamaya kung ano yung sinusupport niya. For example, cash and cash equivalent, cash account sheets, cash count sheets, cash count, prepared to provide the details of the composition of cash on hand. So, yung details makikita natin sa schedule, mayroon pa siyang provide analysis detailed talaga schedule to support that cash on hand and account as a particular date. Yeah, as of particular data because these are balance sheet account. Yeah, that's tawag also known as supporting analysis. This working paper shows the activity during the period in a particular statement. Ang tawag naman doon is account analysis. So, mayroon din tinatawag na account analysis to support each details or some of the details of the supporting schedule. Tawag doon account analysis. But take note class, pertains only the nominal account, real accounts or balance sheet accounts, financial position account, not the nominal, but the real accounts. So, yun yung sa account analysis natin. So, in here, ito yung sample, makikita natin yung relationship ng working papers to financial statement. So, ito yung financial statement ni company. And we have cash on hand and in banks. So, marketable securities. Si auditor magpi-prepare ng working trial balance. So, sinabi doon, mayroon as a minimum, mayroon tayong, of course, ito yung heading natin, header. So, si cash and cash equivalent, ito yung gagawa niya ng working trial balance. Ito yung nasa financial statement or sa general ledger. So, mayroong mas minimum or preference working paper or a per ledger, unadjusted amount, yung sinasabi doon sa definition. And then, debit or credit, net of adjustment. Ito yung further addition or subtraction. Magiging adjusting interest natin. Then, we have the adjusted amount o audited amount na. So, yan sa audit working paper. While si lead schedule naman, siya yung magsusupport ngayon. Siya yung magbibigay, grouping siya. Siya yung magbibigay ng details kay cash and cash on hand. So, ano yung napapaloob kay cash on hand? So, ito siya yung grouping, but magbibigay siya ng details. So, ang napapaloob ni cash is we have petty cash. equitable bank current, equitable PCI bank savings. So, yun yung total. So, the group niya. Ito yung mga groups niya. We have petty cash, equivalent sa bank, current, and savings. Yan. Si lead schedule. While si supporting schedule naman, mas malawak to. Plus, kung si lead schedule nagbibigay ng details per account, si supporting schedule magbibigay siya ng detalye, details of petty cash, details of equitable PCI bank, details of equitable PCI bank to support that lead schedule. That's why si supporting schedule is also known as the largest portion of the auditor's working paper. Siya yung pinakamalawak, siya yung pinakamalaki. Kasi lahat ng account na napupunta dun na napapaload dun kay lead schedule, gagawa niya na yan ng analysis, gagawa niya ng supporting schedules. Alright, take note ha. Supporting schedules is the largest portion of auditor's working papers. Right. So other types of working papers, we have the adjusting and reclassifying entries. Again, class sa basic accounting natin, correction of other errors, these are adjusting. Proper presentation of accounting information, these are reclassifying. How about the audit memoranda and documentation of corroborating information? So we have audit notes and outside documentation. The audit notes used to note items of work to be done, cannot be completed by following the usual sequence of audit procedures. So mga audit notes na natin yan. So specific lang dun sa mga cannot work to be done that cannot be completed. So mga notes, may mga notes tayo. Outside documentation such as confirmation replies and copies of client agreements. So yan. Outside documentation ang tawag nun. Doon natin ipapaloob doon sa working paper na yan na label. Right? So, what is current file versus permanent file? Current file, that pertains the thing of the current year. Examination, during the examination. What are those? We have the original draft of the reports, which is include the financial statement and the draft of the auditor's report. The audit programs, ito yung sa audit document, audit administrative working papers. So mostly, yung nasa types of audit working papers, sila yun, working trial balance, adjusting and classifying, lead and supporting schedule, napapaloob yan yun sa current file natin, yung types of working paper natin. And the general information. So, si permanent file naman pertains to historical or continuing nature pertain to the current situation, current examination. So may mga list tayo doon sa book ni Cabrera. Basahin nyo na lang kung ano yung mga permanent file doon. So dali lang yung i-compare yung current file at permanent file. Alright? So other files may be maintained as tax files and correspondence file. So dito tayo sa ownership and custody of working paper. Sino nga ba yung mag-custody ng working paper? So, of course, the working paper is sa CPA, sa auditor, and not to the client. Whether gawa yan siya ni client or the auditor, excuse me. Okay. Kasi siya na klase ko po. Excuse me. Alright. Sorry. Inawala lang ako. So, ownership yan ni auditor. Si working papers. Unless such documents are required to produce through subpoena issued by court. So, required ng law. Excuse me. So, take note class auditor yan. At saka yung custody. Confidentiality of working papers. So, PSA naman requires confidentiality. Adapt procedures in maintaining confidentiality. So, part yun sa policy procedures ng accounting firm, di ba? The safety of the working papers, retaining them. Again, yung pag-retain ng working papers natin sa public companies, usually 7, not more than 7 years. While sa private companies, minimum 5 years. Sufficient to meet the needs of the practice in accordance with legal, professional requirements and retention. So meron tayong code of ethics dyan na nag-govern sa atin regarding sa confidentiality. So, ano yun? First, the principles of confidentiality impose an obligation of professional accountants to refrain from. So, hindi tayo nagdi-disclose. Bawal dito si Marites. Anong latest? Using the confidential information required as a result of professional and business relationship to their personal advantage. Whether advantage sa third parties, bawal yun. Confidential yan. Another thing is the professional accountant should maintain confidentiality even in a social environment. Diba? Baka ipopost mo yan doon sa AP mo, bawal yan, class. Right. A professional accountant should also maintain confidential information disclosed in a prospective client or employer. Maintain talaga. A prospective client or employer. Kung may mga prospect ka, i-maintain mo yung confidentiality na yan unless the law requires. A professional accountant should also consider the need to maintain confidentiality information within the firm or employing organization. So even in the firm, inside the firm, within the firm, no, mayroon pa rin tayong talagang confidentiality na dapat i-maintain natin. Papasok yan sa code of ethics natin. So hindi pwedeng i-discuss mo yun sa other auditor na other audit team na nag-audit sa ibang company. So mahirap yun. Professional accountant should take all reasonable steps to ensure confidentiality. The need to comply the principles of confidentiality continues even after the end of relationship. Even after the end of relationship between professional accountant and the client. Pwedeng, tapos na tayo nag-audit yung relationship natin, pwede ko na ito i-disclose. So, bawal pa rin yan. The following circumstances where professional accountant are or may be required to disclose confidentiality. So, ito lang siya. So, ano yan? Una is First is disclose is permitted by law and with authorized by client or employer. Iba din yung required by law. So, wala nang authority. Basta required ng law, di-disclose mo yan. Hiningan ka ng data, i-disclose mo yan kasi required na ng law. Alright, that's all for audit documentation class. So I hope you have learned a lot about audit documentation. Ito yung last stage sa audit sampling natin, di ba? Define objectives, the sample, the population, the risk assessment, and the last and evaluate the result, and the last is the audit documentation. So much for today, class. Thank you and God bless.